Hello, my name is David Hopewell from Gwynedd Archaeological Trust. This is the fourth lecture we've put together. These are informal lectures looking at the work of the Trust. And I've been going through the work that we've done on Roman archaeology in Gwynedd. This is the fourth lecture. I've put on a slightly more colourful shirt this time. And this time we'll be looking at Roman roads. This project was an obvious follow-on from work looking at the forts, and was a kind of an overdue project really. Gwynedd Archaeological Trust holds the historic environment record for Gwynedd, as the other trusts do for their areas in Wales. And we had a large amount of information about Roman roads that had been accessioned to the historic environment record. Some of it's published work, some of it's information that the general public have brought in. Some of it's good information, some of it was definitely dodgy. So we thought it was time to work our way through this information and also get it onto GIS mapping. So basically we can get linear features on the historic environment record and assess the data we've got so far. There's lots of different sources of information. Romans didn't leave us many clues. The Antonine itinerary mentions one road. That's the road going from Sigontium, Carnarvon to Diva, Chester. But modern sources, we've got maps, books, journals. The first good synthesis of Roman roads in Britain was by Ivan Margary. He was working in, his first edition was in 1955 to 57, and it was revised in 1967. And the slide here shows his map of Roman roads in Wales. He did a very good job of pulling together information from a lot of different sources, and also produced a numbering system for the roads, which is what we've continued using. So the Roman road from Carnarvon through to Caerhun is Roman road 67C, as we can see from here. Now, he's not the only person who's attempted this. There's been things like Mr. O'Dwyer in 1934 wrote a book called The Roman Roads of Wales, and fell into the trap that many writers on Roman roads have in that seeing almost every old road as a Roman road. Doesn't necessarily follow. If you go almost anywhere in Wales or Britain for that matter, or probably Europe, every old road in the locality will be called the Roman road. So what we needed to do was to bring a little more rigour to this process. Our sources of information were various, as I mentioned. The Ordnance Survey have been looking at Roman roads for many years. This is their historical map and guide to Roman Britain of 2001. And as you can see, they're not very confident on Roman roads in Gwynedd. There are a few that they've got in as definite lines, and most of it's dotted or not there at all. One thing that really, one of the best sources of information that we got doing the desktop work for this was actually the Ordnance Survey files themselves. They produced a series of linear files, which are sort of copies of maps that they stuck together, and you can unravel them into these great long linear files looking at the Roman roads within Gwynedd and beyond, obviously. And so these are Ordnance Survey maps that are annotated very carefully. This is the Roman road over Bulcadavine, which gives you their opinion on what actually survives, and also ties in quite a lot of the already published literature. So we looked at these and digitised quite a lot of information from these, and then went out and started working on the ground. But this allowed us to produce decent maps of Roman roads. So this is an example. This is near Tomonamere, and these can stretch right across the landscape. Now, as you can see, we have different lines here, several different lines. So this is, we're looking at the information. So we're not discarding information, we're assessing it. So we're looking to see whether we actually think it is a Roman road or not. And how do we do that? Well, Roman roads, as with almost everything else that the Romans did, were built to a pattern, and they tended to stick to it. So we're looking at this, diagnostic criteria. How do you identify a Roman road? Well, everybody knows Roman roads are big straight things that go through the landscape, like Watling Street or Ermine Street. But that isn't necessarily true. If you happen to be trying to put a Roman road through the Lake District or North Wales, you will run up against mountains, bogs, cliffs, and you can't actually necessarily make a straight road. So Roman roads are not necessarily this big straight thing running through the landscape. They are in some places, but not always. So we need other diagnostic criteria, because there are also other straight roads as well. So this is what people have found through field work and looking at Roman roads. So we're looking at the road itself is a raised surface made from gravel, stones and clay, usually dug from the subsoil nearby from a quarry pit, another diagnostic feature, and not paved with stones. The surface was a gravelly surface, which is ideal for horses, as opposed to a cobbled surface, which is not. The raised road surface is called an agger. Remember that word, an agger? But you often find sarn in Welsh, meaning causeway, quite often has been used to describe Roman roads, and you find it in Welsh place names. Though every road with sarn in it is not a Roman road. So it tends to be a small ditch on either side. This seems to be a very variable feature, more of a drainage ditch than anything beyond, I think. And also in the uplands where it's not heavily cultivated land, quarry pits. So this is where they got the material to make the agger. The one thing that's very important as well is they tend to be very similar widths in North Wales at least. So we're looking at most Roman roads are about 5 metres wide. They very, very rarely any less. I think we've found one that I was fairly convinced about. It was about 3. Sometimes they're a bit wider. If we look at some of the big roads in England, we'll find much wider roads, but 5 metres is the kind of thing we're looking at. That's the scale we're looking for. Anything smaller, you've got to think very hard about its origins. Here's a photograph from Usk of a very substantial Roman road, but giving the idea of what they're like. So we've got layers of packed gravel and stones with a stone foundation. So this is the kind of thing we should be looking for. This one has appeared in so many books about Roman roads, at Blackstone Edge in Greater Manchester. This is not what a Roman road looks like. This is a cobbled or semi-paved road. It was actually very easy to show that this wasn't a Roman road. It might be on the line of a Roman road, but this is not what a Roman road looks like. In North Wales, this is what a Roman road looks like. This is one of the most obvious and well-preserved roads. This is southeast of Cargyle, running across the uplands there. You can see, it's harder to see in a two-dimensional photograph, but you can see this bank running through the fields here. It's very, very obvious. You tend to get juncus reeds growing along in the ditches. It's 5 metres wide. This is exactly what the kind of thing we're looking for. This is a very obvious one. They're not all as obvious as this. Here's another very obvious one coming south from Bydd. This is an excavation that we did on this road, but you can see the road running beyond the excavation as quite a clear raised agger, about 5 metres wide, and just stripping off the peat from the surface showed this gravelly surface underneath. So this is what we're looking for. It's a good project. We had lots of different sources of information, lots of different people working on it. From all over the country. Hugh Toller, sadly, who passed away a few years ago, was a Roman road researcher from London, and he did a lot of very good and set the bar for Roman road research in North Wales. But we also had people from all over the place. Bryn Gethin, a guy from Warwickshire, was looking at LiDAR research. We've got local societies. We set up a roads group on Anglesey, who's still going and looking at roads, long beyond anything to do with this project. And then we were feeding information into the aerial reconnaissance team for the Royal Commission, and Toby Driver, who was taking photographs of things that we had thought we'd identified on the ground, sending them back to us. So it all adds up to filling in the jigsaw. And then we've got our Gwynedd archaeological volunteers, which we could actually go out and very quickly target a Roman road, strip off the surface. Don't really need to damage the road, just take off the turf or overburden and see what's underneath, and it's usually enough to tell us whether it's a Roman road or not. So here they are. This is the kind of thing we're seeing in the landscape. 5 metre wide, really clear bit at Penn Street, south of Tomonamere. This one's right by the road, so it's an easy one to visit if anybody wants to look at a Roman road. The only times when we're not seeing this agger is when they've actually got to follow the line of the contour around the hillside. So this is just following on from the previous slide. So this is actually more of a sort of terrace on the set into the side of the hillside. These tend to be a bit narrower because the material above the road tends to erode down and cover up the inner edge of the road. Things that have been put down as Roman roads, a lot of them really aren't. There are lots of really interesting early roads. Here's a pack horse trail near Capel-Kirrig that has been called the Roman road. It is clearly not the same as the things we were looking at in the other slides. It's very narrow. It is a made road of sorts, and it probably is an early road, but it's not a Roman military road, because that's what we're looking at here. Here's another one, Llanberis Paths, another early road, obviously a constructed road. It's got some nice bridges and all kinds of things in it, but again, doesn't look like a Roman road to me. So we looked at our sources of information, and we classified the roads so we could for our mapping. So we had known roads, which are surviving remains that we're pretty sure are Roman. Even definitely. The next ones are lengths of roads that we can't actually prove it. They're often damaged, or they're following on from a known bit of road, and maybe underneath a modern track or something like that, but we're fairly sure that we've got features that are to do with the Roman roads. And then we've got lots of these predicted roads where we know there's got to be a Roman road going there between the fort and the last bit of Roman road or whatever, but we don't really know where it is. So we can kind of join in the dots saying we think it goes roughly in this direction. And then we've got other ones which are clearly other types of road or dubious alternative routes that have already proven roads that people have published but are not very convincing. So here's our map of Roman roads. It's very complicated, and as you see, we've got lots of alternate routes that need kind of sorting out. So, for instance, I think we've got the line of one of the roads that was definitely not a Roman road on here. But let's have a look at a few examples. The most well-known Roman road, and the one that the Romans recorded, was the road going east from Saguntium and that leads to Chester. Interestingly, nobody had actually managed to find any of the road between Saguntium and where it turned to the uplands in heading over to Rouen. There's several different published accounts of it, all following modern lanes and things, but we thought we'd better have a look at this one carefully, see if there is anything. Was there any clues that there's anything surviving in the landscape? So we looked, and this was our first foray into trying to find previously unrecognised bits of Roman road. And we looked at the first bit here from Sagontium, and sure enough, not easy to see, but while searching through a load of aerial photographs, we found this very suspiciously straight piece of, well, I can't even tell what this is. It's kind of a crop mark or a small bank running through the fields on the way to Sagontium. It lines up exactly with the gate of Sagontium, and we're in nice flat country here, so it probably will be a straight road. Once we'd spotted that, it's easy to start joining the dots, and Toby Driver went out and had a look along the line that we had suggested, because we could see a few other bits and bobs, and sure enough, a parchment, the foreground of the slide, and then follow it through the middle of the slide, and then disappears off in the top left-hand corner. Some bits of this you could actually, the bit at the top, you could actually see it on the ground very clearly. It was a big yellow patch of differently ripening crop in the field, absolutely blindingly obvious, but nobody had spotted it before. So a great success to start off with, really. If we carry on with this one, this is an interesting bit to look at. This is bulk of avine between somewhere just along the coast from Aber through to Rowan and then over to Canovium in the Conway Valley. This is a multi-period trackway. It was a trackway before the Romans got there. There's lots of prehistoric stuff alongside it, and it is still a trackway today. Is there anything left? There's been quite a lot of things written about this, and I think you can follow it from most of the way across the uplands here, though it's not always in very good condition. But putting together all the information that other people have found and looking at some new bits ourselves, we managed to trace this across the uplands. Some of it hadn't been spotted before. Here's a really nice little bit just as it's dropping down to the coastal plain, with the agger of the Roman road beneath a medieval field system here, really nice and clear, and it follows on from what we knew further across along the pass. In some places it's quite obvious. This is a nice, a bit more than 5 metre wide agger. Actually is emphasised by the multi-period trackway, which has actually gone alongside the agger and made these braided hollow ways, but you can follow the road quite clearly across this bit of the uplands, even though it's not particularly well preserved. Not so obvious, but this bit here was actually recorded by, I think it was George Burrow, when this wall was being built. So we've actually got a 5 metre wide terrace running along here with lots of lovely quarry pits beside it, but with this 19th century wall built on the edge of it, using some of the stones from the road by the looks of it. This is not, it still can be used as a road. It's still quite well preserved, though not particularly obvious because of the wall, really. Let's have a look at another bit. This one was I thought was very interesting. This is a real upland road. This is the place where you might think the Romans wouldn't bother putting a road. So we're looking between Tomonamere and Dolwydd Ellen, up in the uplands, kind of running parallel to the Crimea Pass, I suppose, and overlooking Cwmpen Macno. I'd been up here doing upland survey many years before. The Roman road is marked on the Ordnance Survey map, but I couldn't find any hint of it at all. Myself and John Berman went up into the uplands here on a very cold and wintry day, and the farmer had been digging a series of drainage channels, and you could see beside the drainage channels there were some piles of stones, and they all sort of lined up into something like a straight line. So we went and had a bit of a poke around, and we could see that there was this layer of flat stones underneath quite a depth of peat, and it was all in a straight line, and we tried probing it, and it seemed to be about 5 metres wide. So this looked, though you couldn't really see it much on the surface, this appeared to be the Roman road. We found it in a couple of places, and lo and behold, in one place, very unusual, in the soggy uplands, there was quite a clear parch mark. You can see it here running up the hill behind John. So there's only one thing to do: try an excavation and see if we can see what was there. Well, there was a lot of peat. The peat had built up on top of the road to quite a startling extent, getting on for a metre of peat here. But underneath that metre of peat was a perfectly preserved bit of Roman road. So we can see here the usual sort of gravel surface with some big stones in it, and we could see, and we took off a bit of that surface and found that there was actually a raft of slate slabs taken from nearby outcrops, which are actually sitting on the top of blanket bog, basically. So this is just on peat. So we've got a raft of slate. If you jump up and down, and it does all wobble around a bit, and then we've got the Roman road surface on top of that, and it looks pretty much as it must have done in Roman times. It's hardly worn away at all, so obviously not a particularly popular route. It would serve to join two Roman forts together, but was possibly not so useful for the local population at the time. As you can see, a very slight construction with only a layer of gravel over the top of these slate slabs. Interestingly, a Roman surveyor's peg was still there, preserved in the peat. So very interesting, very nice discovery this, and it can be traced for quite a long way across the uplands. I think Peter Crewe spotted a bit of it about, it must be a kilometre away, by one of the quarries. So let's have a look at another one. Now, the best preserved of the roads is the road between Tomanamere, near Rhufeinig, and Caergai at Llanuwchlyn. This one, there had been quite a few, this had been published by quite a few people, and a lot of them had got it wrong, but there was enough good evidence to actually fill in quite a lot of it just from the published maps and then going out looking at it on the ground, we found quite a lot more was surviving as well. So we've got a good 80% of the road here that is actually there on the ground and can be seen on the ground. It goes through some very remote and soggy places, but it's there. This is a couple of maps showing where it's going through Cumprissor. A few really nice images came from Peter Crewe and Chris Musson. This is at Llyn Hiraethlyn. The road itself is not that easy to see, but the thing that gives it away are the quarry pits, which you can see. It's a railway line runs diagonally across it, and you can see the quarry pits very clearly behind that. And then if you look carefully below that, you can see the zigzag of the Roman road coming down to Cumprissor. We did have a look at a bit of this a bit further along, just to sort of confirm what we were looking at here. Not that it could be much anything else, but just underneath a small amount of peat and turf, here was the 5 metre, or closer to 6 metres here, surface of the Roman road. So this bit carried on up the other side of the valley. The Roman road had then been adopted by the British Army, I think, during in an area of where they were doing training. But it's still there. They still use the Roman zigzags down the hill. A bit further along this road is a really obvious bit here. It's made obvious obviously by the forestry plantation. This was spotted quite a long time ago. I can't even remember the date of this. About Richard Kelly. This is at Blaen Lliw Uchaf, and he he managed to get a section through the road. This was before the forestry went in, and he managed to persuade them to leave the Roman road as a ride through the forestry, so it didn't get trashed by the forestry. We weren't sure whether this had actually, if everybody got this right and this was the Roman road. It's not very obvious on the ground, but we did excavate the side of a stream running through the forestry ride, and there, sure enough, is the agger of the Roman road, looking very similar to that found by Richard Kelly. Further on, we run down to Ffyrdd Rhufeinig. This is the real uplands, not easy to find here, but you can find it, and it is possible to see. This bit's one of the, possibly the more obvious bits here. You can see the changes in the vegetation. In a 5 metre wide agger, it's a bit difficult to actually see it in the long grass, but the changes in the vegetation give it away. A very strange bit of wall built across the Roman road here. I'm not quite sure what the significance or even function of this was. So that bit just gives us good illustration of the fact that the roads survive very well in the uplands in Gwynedd in a few places. Well, in quite a lot of places actually. So I can't go on too long with this, so a couple more examples. We've got one at Bydd here, so this is the Roman road at Bydd, Turnpike Road, built on the Roman road. This seems to have happened quite a lot. And you can see the agger of the road very clearly here, and the quarry pits equally clearly. A very nice bit. This is the one that we actually took a section across earlier on. Finally, LiDAR. This has been the thing that has made a great difference to our search for Roman roads in the last few years. LiDAR is a surveying technique where a laser beam is bounced off the ground from an aeroplane in a series of traverses, which actually builds up a very detailed and accurate ground model. This has been used initially for modelling floodplains and all that kind of stuff, but we now have very good coverage, and it is available online from various government portals. So this has turned out to be a great at showing up Roman roads in the landscape. I'll just nip back to the first slide we saw, running into Saguntium, and you can see this is the LiDAR image, and you can see the Roman road more clearly than we could from the aerial photograph. Not always. It takes quite a lot of looking to find these things, but they are definitely there. Some of them are very clear. This is a really nice one. This is on the road from Tomanamere that we were talking about earlier on. You can see a modern lane, which is the Roman road, with quarry pits beautifully all the way alongside it. So people knew about that one, very obvious. But when you actually look to either side of it, the Roman road didn't carry on following the lane. It went across a field and has been ploughed out to a certain extent. But you can see a continuation of the quarry pits on the western side, and a big zigzag on the eastern side. So this is an example of the kind of thing you can see on the LiDAR, and it's allowed us to fill in a lot of gaps and details. Two roads that we knew practically nothing about. One was the road from Saguntium down to Penllystyn. There have been lots of ideas about where that went. It's not very easy to see on LiDAR, but you can see a lot of it. If you look at the map here, you can see the red bits are the bits we can actually see. So we can see it going past Llanwnder, Groeslan, and it goes right through the middle of Pen-y-Groes. Here's an example of what it looks like on the LiDAR. Not easy to see, but if you study it carefully, you can actually see it running for quite a long way through this landscape. I'm not going to go through this in detail because it's got to be a short lecture, but suffice to say, it's very difficult to see on the ground. The LiDAR is very sensitive and is very good at spotting long linear features. But when you try and see them on the ground, you can just about see the bump in the wall behind Sadie, is it? But very difficult to see on the ground, as I was saying. Finally, we're going to have a look at. This is the last bit. This lecture's turning out to be a bit longer than I thought it would be, but never mind. The one Roman road that we really had trouble, or that there was a lot of controversy about, was the Roman road from Brythdir to the east of Darlithoedd, running down to Pennal near Machynlleth. Not an obvious route, and there are lots of old roads here. So there are two published routes. One took a long route down the Ffyrdd to the west of Cadair Idris, quite a long way round. There's several different old roads along there. It's all very interesting, but and we walked quite a lot of this, but couldn't really see anything that we were totally convinced about, though there's possibilities there. And the other would be a very more direct route from Brythdir down through Corris, but a very rough route. Quite a few people thought this would not be this difficult route would not be the one that the Romans would have taken. But having seen the road near Darlithoedd and across the uplands there, you think they'll probably just about go anywhere that's possible. But this hadn't been sorted out, but LiDAR came to our rescue. Now this is a really nice LiDAR image. I don't know if you can see it on here. We've got various roads. I'll put an annotated slide up in a sec. You can see lots of peak cuttings in the middle, but to the west of that, we've got a long, straight line running through these fields, as you can see here. We went out and had a look at this on the ground, couldn't see anything at all, but when we tried probing in the peat, you can stick an iron probe in, just a thin iron rod. Most places in the peat it go right down to like 2 meters or something, then clonk, 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 Roman road, 5 meters off the other side. Looked like a good candidate. Couldn't really think what else it was. So we did a couple of small excavation trenches, hand dug them, and sure enough, in this field here, which had been ploughed in the Second World War, I think we're quite close to the surface. We had this rocky foundations of the Roman road. Again, this is a section right through it. We don't usually do this, but it was worth a try here, and it's quite badly damaged anyway. You can actually see that you've got this gravel road with a stony foundation, these big rocks as a foundation, and the gravel on top of it. We put a trench in a bit further down. Here's our trusty Roman road excavation team, and this actually showed up the road beautifully. It was only a few centimetres below the surface. Farmer obviously knew where it was, because this was the dry bit of the bogs where he'd been driving his quad bike, but very clear Roman road, and this really shows that the Romans took the direct route south from Brythdir. So we can now amend the map like this, and probably discount all the stuff to the other side of Cadair Idris. It's worth keeping an eye on it. You never know, there might be another fort around there, but I suspect not. At the end of this, we put a huge amount of new data into the historic environment record and assessed all the roads that had been written about and published, and got this big complicated map. We had a report about that thick every year. So we thought it would be a good idea to synthesize all this down to look at the most interesting bits of it, and we produced a book, Roman Roads in North West Wales. We've sold almost all of them now, but I hope in the not too distant future we'll either print some more or put it up online. There we go, Roman Roads in North West Wales.